Did you know that 73% of people who discover their spouse's affair never see it coming? I was one of them. But here's what the statistics don't tell you: what happens when you find out your husband's affair by accidentally intercepting the exact moment he's planning his romantic weekend getaway, and you end up being there waiting for him with his mistress's husband? This isn't just another cheating story. This is about a woman who turned her darkest betrayal into the most powerful act of truth-telling you've ever witnessed. And what unfolded that weekend at the lake house changed 4 lives forever. What I discovered next didn't just expose their lies, it revealed a web of deception that went deeper than I ever imagined. Stay with me, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. My name is Catherine Wells. I'm 42 years old, living in Buffalo, New York. For 16 years, I was the wife of James Wells, a successful investment banker. We had what everyone called a perfect marriage. Beautiful house in Elmwood Village, 2 cars, joint investments, and a social circle that envied our stability. But perfection, I learned, is just another word for illusion. James and I met in college. He was the economics major with big dreams. I was the English literature student who believed in forever. We built our life together brick by brick, his career, my career as a publishing consultant, our shared dreams of traveling the world. Growing old together, there were signs. There always are. The way he'd started checking his phone during dinner, claiming it was market updates. The new cologne that appeared in our bathroom without explanation. The gym membership he suddenly cared about after 15 years of calling exercise a waste of time. But the moment everything changed, it was so ordinary. So devastatingly ordinary. It was a Thursday morning in September. I was in our kitchen, making coffee before heading to my home office. James was upstairs getting ready for work. His phone was charging on the counter next to me when it buzzed with a text message. The preview lit up the screen. Can't wait for our weekend at the cabin. I bought that red dress you mentioned. It's going to be just us finally. Says end of us. Listed as Morgan. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, staring at those words. Behind me, I could hear James moving around upstairs, the sound of his shower running, the mundane routine of our morning, but everything had shifted. I didn't unlock his phone. I didn't need to. That message was confirmation of something I'd been pushing down for months. The distance between us. The way he'd look through me during conversations. The business trips that seemed to multiply. When James came downstairs 15 minutes later, adjusting his tie, I was sitting at our dining table with my coffee, looking completely normal. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing the top of my head like he had every morning for 16 years. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady. "Don't forget you have that client conference in Rochester this weekend." He paused, just for a second. "Right. Yeah, I'll probably have to stay overnight. These things always run long." I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. "Drive safely." He looked at me for a moment, maybe sensing something different, but then grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. "I love you," he called out, like always. "I love you too," I replied, but as the door closed behind him, I realized those might be the last words of love I'd ever speak to him. Because love, real love, can't survive in the presence of lies. I sat in that kitchen for 2 hours, thinking. Not crying. Not panicking. Just thinking. James had always been meticulous. Careful. If he was having an affair, he'd have covered his tracks. But everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has moments of carelessness, and I knew exactly when those moments were. James was a creature of habit. Every Thursday night, he played poker with his college friends. He'd come home around midnight, slightly drunk, and fall into the deepest sleep of the week. I'd learned this pattern over 16 years of marriage. That Thursday night, after James had been snoring for an hour, I carefully lifted his phone and pressed his thumb to the sensor. The screen illuminated, and I stepped into a world I didn't recognize. The message about the red dress was just the beginning. Morgan wasn't some young secretary or random encounter. She was Morgan Davis, 38 years old, a successful real estate agent specializing in luxury properties. She was married to a man named David Davis, a pediatric surgeon at Buffalo General Hospital. I found photos of them together at restaurants I'd never been to. Screenshots of conversations about their future. Hotel receipts from weekends when James told me he was visiting his mother in Albany, but the most devastating discovery was the timeline that they'd been together for 8 months. 8 months of elaborate lies. 8 months of James coming home to me, kissing me goodnight, making love to me, while carrying on a completely separate life with someone else. I read every message. Looked at every photo. Traced every lie back to its source. By 3 a.m., I had a complete picture of their relationship. And I had a decision to make. I could confront James. I could scream and cry and demand explanations. I could file for divorce and let lawyers handle the mess. Or I could do something different. I could give them exactly what they thought they wanted and show them what truth really looked like. The next morning, I sat in my office and crafted a message I rewrote 23 times. Dr. Davis, my name is Catherine Wells. I believe my husband James and your wife Morgan are having an affair. I have extensive evidence, and I think we should talk. If you're willing to listen, please call me at 716-555-8934. I hit send before I could change my mind. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. Is this Catherine? His voice was deep, carefully controlled, but I could hear the tremor underneath. Yes. Is this some kind of joke? I wish it were, I said quietly. Dr. Davis, I have 8 months of text messages, photos, and credit card statements. They're planning to spend this weekend at a cabin in the Finger Lakes. I think they believe they're being careful, but they're not, he finished. No. They're not. A long pause. What do you want to do? I took a breath. I want to give them exactly what they think they want. A romantic weekend at the cabin. Just the two of them. Except they won't be alone, he said, understanding immediately. Dr. Davis, do you know where this cabin is? I do. Morgan and we looked at it 2 years ago. Thought about buying it as an investment property. I remember exactly where it is. Then I think, I said slowly, we should be there when they arrive. The silence stretched between us. Then, yes. I think we should. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop in Geneva, halfway between Buffalo and the cabin location. I arrived first, choosing a table in the back where we could talk privately. David Davis walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. Tall, graying at the temples, wearing a navy coat and carrying himself with the careful precision of a man who'd spent years making life and death decisions. He sat down across from me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. Two people whose lives had been shattered by the same betrayal. Show me, he said simply. I placed my phone on the table and opened James's message thread with Morgan. David read in silence, his expression growing more strained with each swipe. When he reached the photos, James and Morgan holding hands outside a jewelry store, Morgan trying on what looked like an engagement ring, his jaw tightened. She told me she was working late, he said quietly. That night. She said she was showing a property to demanding clients. James told me he was at a conference, I replied. Same night. We sat there for an hour, sharing the details of our separate hells. The lies we'd believed. The excuses we'd made. The way we'd both started to doubt our own instincts. I thought I was losing my mind, David said. She'd gotten so distant, so secretive. But every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd turn it around. Make me feel like I was being paranoid. Or controlling. James did the same thing, I said. I'd ask about the late nights, the weekend trips, and he'd act like I was being irrational. Like I was imagining things. But we weren't imagining anything, David said. No. We weren't. He leaned back in his chair. Catherine, I need you to. No. I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for closure. I need to see her face when she realizes the game is over. That's exactly what I want too, I said. I don't want to hurt them. I just want them to face the truth. They think they're so clever, David said. So careful. They have no idea that people who really love you pay attention. That lies leave traces. They're about to find out, I said. What happened next required more courage than I knew I possessed. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up and let the truth speak for itself. The cabin was a 40-minute drive from Geneva, nestled on the shores of Seneca Lake. I'd been there once before, 2 years ago, when James and I had considered renting it for our anniversary. It was beautiful. Rustic wood and stone, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, a wraparound deck that caught the sunset, the perfect place for a romantic getaway. Or a reckoning. David and I arrived separately on Saturday morning. I got there first, using the spare key he'd obtained through his real estate connections. The cabin was exactly as I remembered, cozy, intimate, designed for lovers. When David arrived, he stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. She sent me pictures of this place, he said quietly. 2 years ago. Said it was for a client, but now you know she was already planning this, I finished. Yeah. We spent the morning preparing, but not like we were setting a trap. More like we were creating a space for truth to unfold naturally. I made coffee and set it on the kitchen island. David arranged 4 chairs around the dining table, 2 facing the front door, 2 with their backs to it. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. I brought something, I said, placing a manila envelope on the table. Everything I found. If we're going to do this, we should do it completely. David nodded. I printed out our credit card statements. The charges for hotels, restaurants, gifts. Things I didn't understand at the time. How do you think they'll react? I asked. Morgan will try to explain first, he said. She's good at that. Making things sound reasonable when they're not. James will get angry. Then he'll try to charm his way out of it. He's been doing that his whole life. And us? David asked. How do we handle this? I considered the question. We stay calm. We don't yell or accuse. We just present the truth and let them respond to it. No drama, David agreed. Just reality. We spent the afternoon talking about ourselves beyond the betrayal. I learned that David had wanted to be a writer before medicine, that he still played piano badly but enthusiastically, that he'd been carrying the weight of his marriage problems alone for almost a year. I told him about my dreams of opening a bookstore, about how I'd given up freelance writing to support James's career, about the way I'd slowly made myself smaller to accommodate his ambitions. Do you think we're doing the right thing? I asked as the sun began to set. I think, David said, we're doing the only thing that will let us sleep at night. As 5 o'clock approached, we took our positions. David and I sat across from each other at the dining table, the envelope of evidence between us. Through the window, I could see the lake reflecting the golden light of early evening. Are you ready? David asked. I've been ready for 8 months, I replied. I just didn't know it. At 5:58, we heard the crunch of gravel outside. Through the window, I watched James's black BMW pull into the driveway. He got out first, carrying a duffel bag and a bottle of wine. Morgan followed, holding a bouquet of white roses. And laughing at something he'd said. They looked happy. Carefree. Like they were exactly where they belonged. The front door opened, and Morgan stepped inside first, still smiling. Then she saw us, her face went completely white, and she stopped so abruptly that James bumped into her. What the hell? James started, then looked up and saw David and me sitting calmly at the table. The wine bottle slipped from James's hands, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Hello, James, I said, my voice steady as lake water. Morgan. Morgan stepped backward, the roses falling from her hands. David, this isn't what? David asked, standing slowly. Isn't exactly what it looks like? James found his voice. Catherine, you don't understand. This is a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding? I interrupted, opening the envelope and spreading photos across the table. James, I have 8 months of text messages between you and Morgan. I have hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and photos of you two looking at engagement rings. Which part am I misunderstanding? Morgan sank into one of the chairs, covering her face with her hands. David, please, let me explain. Explain what? David's voice was quiet but firm. Explain how you've been telling me you need space while making space for someone else? Explain how you've been crying about our marriage problems while creating new ones with my money. Your money? James said, his defensive instincts kicking in. The hotel rooms, James, I said calmly. The restaurants, the weekend trips. Did you think I wouldn't notice the credit card charges? Did you think I wouldn't wonder why you were spending money in places you claimed you'd never been? The room fell silent except for the sound of Morgan crying. I stood up, smoothing my sweater. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to give you both a choice. You can continue this relationship, but you'll do it as single people. Or you can end it and try to rebuild what you've broken. But you can't have both. Catherine. James started. I'm not finished, I said, my voice still calm. James, do you remember when your father died 3 years ago? Who sat with you in the hospital? Who handled all the arrangements while you grieved? Who held you when you cried? He was quiet. And, Morgan, I continued, turning to her. David told me about your mother's dementia diagnosis. How you've been struggling with the decision about care facilities. Does James know about that? Does he know about the nights you've spent crying, trying to figure out how to help her? Morgan looked up, confused. How do you? Because that's what people who love you do, I said. They know your pain. They carry it with you. They don't run from it or try to replace it with excitement and hotel rooms. But then something happened that none of us expected. Morgan suddenly stood up, her hand pressed against her stomach. Her face had gone pale, and she was looking at David with something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. There's something else, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I haven't told anyone. David's expression shifted. What? Morgan looked from David to James, then back to me. I'm pregnant. The cabin went completely silent. James stared at her, his mouth open. What did you say? I'm pregnant, Morgan repeated, tears streaming down her face. I found out 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you both this weekend, but whose baby is it? David asked, his voice barely controlled. Morgan looked at him, then at James. I don't know. It could be either of you. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I felt something shift inside me, but it wasn't jealousy or anger. It was a profound sadness for all of us, for the innocent life that would be born into this chaos. James sat down heavily. You don't know? We were still. David and I were still. Morgan couldn't finish the sentence. Still what? David asked. Still married? Still sharing a bed? Still pretending everything was normal while you were planning your escape? I never planned to escape, Morgan said. I never planned for any of this to happen. But it did happen, I said quietly. And now there's a baby involved. David stood up, walking to the window. A baby who deserves better than parents who can't tell the truth. David, please, Morgan said. I know I made mistakes, but mistakes. David turned back to her. Morgan, you've been living a double life for 8 months. You've been lying to me every single day. You've been using our money to fund your affair. And now you're telling me you're pregnant with a baby that might not even be mine. I'm sorry, Morgan whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, David said. Sorry doesn't give me back the year I spent thinking I was losing my mind. Sorry doesn't make me trust you again. James looked at me, his eyes desperate. Catherine, we can work through this. People make mistakes. We can go to counseling, we can't, I said simply. Because you don't want to work through this, James. You want to keep doing what you've been doing while I pretend it's not happening. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder, setting it on the table. These are divorce papers. I've already filed them. You can sign them now or sign them later, but they're happening. James picked up the papers, his hands shaking. Catherine, please. 16 years of marriage. It has to count for something. It does count, I said. It taught me what I will and won't accept in my life. And I won't accept this. The sun was setting over Seneca Lake, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the cabin, we'd reached a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of forgiveness, but the peace of truth finally spoken. David had made his decision first. Morgan, I'll stay until the baby is born. But I want a paternity test immediately. And regardless of the results, our marriage is over. David, Morgan started. I'm not finished, he said. If the baby is mine, I'll be the best father I can be. But I won't be your husband anymore. I can't. The trust is gone, and without trust, there's nothing left. Morgan nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. James had signed the divorce papers, his hands shaking as he wrote his name. Catherine, I want you to know. I never meant for it to happen like this. I believe you, I said. But James, not meaning for it to happen, doesn't change the fact that it did. And it doesn't change the fact that you made choices, every single day, that led us here. So this is it, he asked. 16 years, and it's just over? 16 years wasn't wasted, I said. I learned things about myself, about what I want, about what I deserve. And maybe someday, you'll learn something too. I gathered my things, folding the evidence back into its envelope. I didn't need it anymore. The truth was out, and that was all I'd wanted. Catherine, Morgan said as I reached the door. I know I have no right to ask, but do you think you'll ever forgive me? I turned back to her. Morgan, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something I give myself. And I forgive you because holding on to anger would only hurt me. But forgiving you doesn't mean trusting you. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. It just means I'm choosing peace over bitterness. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, I said. Just be honest with your child. Whatever happens, that baby deserves parents who tell the truth. David walked me to my car. How do you feel? He asked. Tired, I said. Sad. But free. For the first time in months, I feel free. I know what you mean, he said. I've been carrying this weight for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. We stood there for a moment, looking at the cabin where our marriages had officially ended. What happens now? I asked. Now we figure out how to be ourselves again, David said. How to trust our own judgment. How to believe in good things again. That sounds like a good plan, I said. As I drove away from the cabin, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The lights were still on inside, and I could see silhouettes moving around. 3 people trying to figure out how to navigate the wreckage of their choices, but I wasn't one of them anymore. I was driving toward something new, something honest, something mine. What happened over the next year changed everything about how I saw love, trust, and my own worth. And if you're wondering whether I ever looked back, well, let me tell you about the life I built after I chose myself. 1 year later, I was standing in my new apartment in downtown Buffalo, looking out at the city lights with a cup of tea in my hands. The divorce had been finalized in 3 months, thanks to James's cooperation and my thorough documentation. James had moved in with Morgan, but their relationship had crumbled under the weight of their mutual deception. The baby, when it arrived, was David's. James had disappeared from their lives completely, unable to handle the complexity of the situation he'd helped create. David and I had stayed in touch, not as lovers but as friends bonded by shared experience. He'd found a way to co-parent with Morgan while maintaining clear boundaries. He'd also started writing again, something he'd abandoned years ago. How's the book coming? I asked during one of our phone calls. Slowly, he said. But honestly, I think that's the difference now. Everything I do has to be honest, or it doesn't feel worth doing. I understand that, I said. Catherine, he said after a pause. I want you to know, that day at the cabin, what you did, it saved my life. I was drowning, and I didn't even know it. We saved each other, I said. That's what people do when they refuse to keep living in lies. I'd changed everything about my life. Left my consulting job to open the bookstore I'd dreamed about for years. It was small, cozy, filled with the kind of books that made people think and feel. I hosted reading groups, writing workshops, and poetry nights. The store became a gathering place for people who'd been through transitions. Divorced women finding their voices. Widowers learning to live alone. Young people figuring out who they were apart from their families. I didn't date for the first year. I needed to remember who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone else's idea of perfect. I took pottery classes, learned to play the guitar, traveled to places James had never wanted to go. When I finally did start dating again, I was different. I asked harder questions. I paid attention to actions instead of just words. I didn't make excuses for inconsistency or try to fix people who weren't interested in fixing themselves. Do you ever miss it? My friend Sarah asked one evening as we closed the bookstore together. The marriage, I mean. The certainty of it? I thought about it. I miss the idea of it, I said. The version I thought I had. But I don't miss the reality. I don't miss making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's selfishness. I don't miss pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Do you think you'll get married again? Maybe, I said. But it would have to be to someone who enhances my life instead of consuming it. Someone who sees my independence as a strength, not a threat. That sounds lonely, she said. No, I said, smiling. Lonely is being married to someone who's already left you emotionally. This is just peaceful. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The city lights twinkled below me, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, contentment. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, standing in that kitchen reading a text message that changed everything. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her what I knew now, that betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's just the end of a chapter, that you can't love someone into being trustworthy, but you can love yourself enough to walk away when they're not, that the right person will never make you feel like you're asking for too much when you ask for honesty, that starting over isn't a failure. It's courage. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Morgan and I finalized the co-parenting agreement today. It's done. How are you? I texted back, I'm good. Really good. How does it feel to be free? Like, I can breathe again, he replied. Thank you for showing me it was possible. I set my phone down and looked out at the city, at all the lights representing all the lives being lived, all the choices being made, all the people figuring out how to love themselves and each other better. I thought about James and Morgan, probably still trying to make sense of the wreckage they'd created. I felt sorry for them, but not responsible for them. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. I'd made my choice too. I'd chosen truth over comfort, dignity over false peace, my own worth over someone else's convenience, and sitting there in my apartment, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, I knew I'd chosen right. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is stop enabling their worst behaviors. Sometimes love means walking away. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to start over. I was 43 years old, divorced, and living alone in a city that felt full of possibilities. I owned a bookstore that made people happy. I had friends who valued honesty. I had a life that was completely, authentically mine. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. What would you have done? Would you have confronted them the way Catherine did, or would you have chosen a different path? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in truth and choosing yourself when it matters most. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust your own worth.